What if the way you're using your TFSA and RRSP isn't actually helping you as much as you may think? Maybe you've been told to max out your RRSP or put everything into your TFSA. And sure, those ideas aren't bad, but they're often tossed around like blanket advice, and that's where people really start to miss the mark. These two accounts are not interchangeable, they do very different things, and the order you use them in, that matters a lot. Because here's the thing, the TFSA and RRSP are some of the most powerful financial tools that are available to Canadians. And this isn't just about saving more or paying less tax. It's about how you use these tools over time, which one helps you more when you're just getting started, and which one protects you when your income goes up, and which one could quietly create a tax headache later on if you're not careful. In this video, I'm going to walk you through when to use your TFSA, when the RSP is a better way to go, and how combining them strategically can save you a lot more than just dollars. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I'm Jacqueline Ozdemir, a financial advisor here at Ferguson Financial Planning of CI Assante Wealth Management. I work with people who are successful in many areas of life, but still feel unsure about whether their savings are actually being used the smartest way possible, especially when it comes to accounts like TFSAs and RRSPs. These are the kinds of details that can easily fall through the cracks, costing you way more in tax or lost opportunity than most people realize. And in today's video, we're going to break that down. I'll explain how these accounts work at their core, which one tends to be better depending on your income, and how your ideal strategy changes as you age, and a few common trip-ups I see all the time that are easy to avoid once you know what to look for. If you find this video helpful, please hit like, drop a comment below to let me know, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you catch the next one. All right, let's get into the details. Let's start with the basics. Understanding the core differences between TFSAs and RRSPs. Essentially, the TFSA and RRSP serve different purposes in your long-term strategy. Currently, you're allowed to contribute $7,000 per year into your TFSA, and what makes it so attractive is that any unused contribution room from prior years carries forward, and once you take money out, that room replenishes the following year. That means your money can grow tax-free with complete flexibility. On the flip side, the RRSP lets you contribute an amount equal to 18% of your prior year's income, but to a limit. A key distinction is the tax treatment. Contributions to an RRSP reduce your taxable income today, giving you an immediate tax benefit, but withdrawals are fully taxable as income. Let me give you two quick examples. Sarah is 32, early in her career, earning around $55,000 a year. She's saving steadily, but her priority is flexibility, building an emergency cushion, maybe a future home purchase, or maybe for a vacation. For Sarah, the TFSA is a no-brainer. It lets her invest for growth, access the funds if needed, and avoid unnecessary tax complexity. On the other hand, we have Mark, now in his late 40s, earning north of 6 figures and a higher marginal tax bracket. Mark's focus is looking for ways to reduce his tax bill. For him, RRSPs make more sense. The immediate deduction can lower his taxable income today, and he plans to draw from the RRSP in retirement when his income and tax rate will likely be lower. But here's where people often get tripped up. They assume the RRSP is always the better deal because of the refund. It's not. The refund is really just tax deferred, not tax free. And if you're not paying attention, it can come back to bite you in retirement, especially if your withdrawals put you into a higher tax bracket than you are today. Now, let's consider how your income level and current tax bracket directly influence which savings vehicle might be more beneficial. We'll start with folks earning under $50,000 to $60,000 a year. At this level, you're likely in one of the lowest federal tax brackets, and while contributing to an RRSP does give you a tax deduction, the actual refund or savings might be pretty modest. In fact, in some cases, it barely moves the needle. And that's why for many in this range, the TFSA usually makes more sense. You don't need to worry about future taxes on withdrawals, and you're not giving up much in the way of tax savings today. Plus, life at this stage often calls for flexibility, whether it's saving for a car, paying off debt, or just building an emergency fund. And the TFSA gives you that without locking your money or triggering penalties when you need it. And keep in mind, you can carry forward unused RRSP room to a year when you might be in a higher tax bracket and benefit more from the deduction. Now, for people earning somewhere between $60,000 and $100,000 a year, things start to shift a bit. You're paying more in tax, and that RSP deduction starts to carry real weight. This is where a blended strategy can work really well. The approach is something like this. Contribute to your RSP, then use the tax refund you get to top up your TFSA. And now you've got both tax efficiency and liquidity working in tandem. For example, let's say you contribute $10,000 to your RRSP and get a $3,000 tax refund. If you then move that $3,000 into your TFSA, you're now compounding growth in two different ways. One that gives you a break today with your RRSP, and one that protects you from taxes tomorrow with your TFSA. That kind of layering can really add up over time, and it gives you options down the line. Because if a big expense comes up, your TFSA can absorb the hit without throwing your retirement off track with taxes. Then there's the higher income range, $100,000 and above. At this level, the RRSP becomes a heavy hitter. Every dollar you contribute can claw back a significant amount in taxes, especially in provinces with steep marginal tax rates. For someone in Ontario making $120,000 a year, a $15,000 RRSP contribution could save them roughly $6,500 on taxes, depending on deductions and credits. That's meaningful. But that doesn't mean the TFSA gets ignored. In fact, it can play a key role in managing retirement income later on. For example, when you start withdrawing from your RRSP or RIF, that income could bump you into a higher tax bracket or trigger OAS clawbacks. Having a well-funded TFSA gives you a way to supplement your cash flow in retirement without affecting your taxable income. That's a powerful lever, especially for those trying to fine-tune their withdrawal strategy and keep more government benefits. So what's the takeaway? Your income doesn't just impact how much you can contribute, it changes what each account actually does for you. The lower your income, the more the TFSA's flexibility shines. As your income grows, the RRSP's tax deductions start pulling their weight. But at nearly every stage, it's not about choosing one or the other, it's about knowing how to use both in a way that makes sense for where you're at today and where you're headed tomorrow. It's about maximizing what those contributions actually do for you over time. Income level tells you what's possible, but life stage tells you what's practical. Let's take a step back and look at this from a life stage perspective, because what makes sense in your 20s won't necessarily make sense in your 50s. The way you use your TFSA and RRSP should evolve as your income, goals, and tax situation change over time. In your 20s and maybe even your early 30s, flexibility is usually the name of the game. You might be paying down student loans, saving for a home, or building up a financial buffer. This is where the TFSA really stands out. You can invest for growth without locking yourself into a retirement timeline. And if life throws a curveball, you can access your money without penalties or paperwork. Take Emma, for example. A young professional just starting out, she's contributing steadily to her TFSA, knowing she'll get the tax-free growth now and the option to use the funds later, whether it's for a big move, a wedding, or just getting through a rough patch. Even with RRSP matching at work, the TFSA still gives her a bit more breathing room. In your 40s and 50s, priorities usually shift. Your income is likely higher and expenses more predictable, and tax planning becomes more important. At this stage, the RRSP often becomes your main workhorse. Bigger contributions lead to bigger tax deductions, which can lower your overall tax bill and help build a solid retirement foundation. That said, don't ignore the TFSA. It's a great place to park money for short-term goals, one-off expenses, or even to serve as a tax-free top-up during market downturns or job transitions. Then, as you head into your 60s, strategy matters more than ever. This is where the RRSP tax bomb can sneak up on you. If you retire with a large RRSP balance and no withdrawal plan, you might find yourself in a higher tax bracket after you stop working, especially when mandatory RRIF withdrawals and government benefits start layering on top of each other. One smart move: during lower income years, consider withdrawing modest amounts from your RRSP and moving them into your TFSA. You'll pay less tax on the withdrawal today, and once it's in the TFSA, that money can keep growing without creating tax trouble down the road. I've covered withdrawal strategies in a previous video, and I'll link that in the description below so you can check that out. Bottom line, your strategy should move with you. Each stage of life brings different financial priorities, and the more intentionally you adjust your TFSA and RRSP use along the way, the better off you'll be when it really counts. While both TFSAs and RRSPs offer fantastic benefits, there are several pitfalls that can derail your plan if you're not careful. One common mistake is assuming that an RRSP is always the better option just because it offers a tax deduction at the time of contribution. Without careful planning, you might end up with a substantial RRSP balance that leads to higher taxable income in retirement, a situation often referred to as the tax bomb. For instance, if you continuously contribute to an RRSP without planning the conversion or withdrawal strategy, you could increase your tax liability at a time when you're supposed to enjoy reduced tax rates. Another frequent slip up: occurs with the TFSA. Many people withdraw funds from their TFSA thinking there's no planning involved, not realizing that while withdrawals are tax-free, you have to keep track of your re-contribution room. This is something that is often overlooked and can lead to over-contributing and facing penalties from the CRA. Mike, a client in his 50s, ran into this exact issue. He pulled money out of his TFSA for a home renovation in January, then topped it back up a few months later in May, but without realizing that he triggered a penalty. It's a simple mistake, but one that cost him time, stress, and money. And finally, one that flies under the radar is the mistake some individuals make in delaying TFSA contributions because they're overly focused on building up their RRSP balances. This can cost you in the long run by missing out on tax-free compounding in the TFSA. Even in scenarios where the RRSP seems to offer immediate benefits, neglecting the TFSA is a missed opportunity, especially when it comes to managing tax implications and government benefits later in life. The key is balance and understanding of your personal situation to avoid these errors. Keeping track of both your contribution limits and understanding the impacts of withdrawals are essential steps in avoiding these pitfalls, ensuring that your wealth building strategy remains robust and stress-free over time. The truth is, none of these mistakes are catastrophic on their own, but they compound over time. The fix isn't complicated. Stay aware of your contribution limits, plan your withdrawals, and make sure both accounts are pulling their weight in your broader strategy. Now, let's look at how you can combine these accounts effectively, a sequencing strategy that leverages the strengths of both. I mentioned this one a little earlier in the video. One smart approach is to use your RRSP tax refund to fund your TFSA. So let's say you contribute $20,000 to your RRSP. That might generate a tax refund of roughly $6,000 if you're in a higher tax bracket. Instead of spending that refund or letting it sit idle, you move the full $6,000 of it into your TFSA and invest it into a growth-oriented ETF or mutual fund. Now let's say that investment earns an average return of 6% per year. Over 20 years, that $6,000 could grow to just over $19,200. And because it's inside your TFSA, none of that growth is taxable. That's $13,000 in gains you keep just by putting the refund to work in the right place. And that's just considering the initial $6,000 TFSA contribution, not to mention the impact that this strategy could have if you use it year after year. Another move worth considering is transferring your RRSP funds into your TFSA during low income years, like between jobs and early retirement, or during the gap between leaving work and when CPP or OAS kicks in. Here's how that might look in practice. Let's say you've retired at 60 and don't plan to start collecting CPP or OAS until 65. You have no other significant income, so your taxable income for the year is effectively zero. You decide to withdraw $15,000 from your RRSP. In Ontario, that keeps you well within the basic personal amount, meaning your total tax bill on that $15,000 might be less than $1,000 depending on credits and deductions. Now you take that $15,000 and contribute it to your TFSA, assuming you have the room. From there, you can invest it into a diversified portfolio, something similar to the earlier scenario. And again, let's say it grows at 6% annually over the next 10 years, it could grow to about $27,000. And since it's in your TFSA, you'll never pay tax on that growth. By doing this, you're not just lowering your future RSP balance, which helps reduce forced RIF withdrawals and potential OAS clawbacks, you're also shifting taxable income into a tax-free environment, quietly building flexibility and control into your retirement cash flow plan. Let's bring this all together. There's no universal rule for choosing between a TFSA and an RSP because the right choice depends on where you are in life, what you earn, and what you're planning for. The real power lies in understanding how each account works and how to use them in sequence. If you're early in your career, a TFSA might give you more freedom to build momentum without locking things in. As your income grows, RRSP contributions can reduce your tax bill while keeping your savings on track for retirement. And at every stage, the TFSA can act as a flexible helper, especially useful for topping up tax-free growth or managing withdrawals later in life. The key is, and don't just set your plan once and forget it. A good rule of thumb is to schedule annual check-ins either on your own or with an advisor to track whether your current strategy is in sync with your long-term goals. Look at your income, your contribution room, and whether your plan still matches your goals. It doesn't have to be complicated, but it does have to be considered. Because once you understand how to use these tools together, the whole picture gets clearer and more efficient. So here's what all of this adds up to. Understanding the difference between an RRSP and a TFSA isn't just about what each account lets you do, it's about knowing which one works harder for you, when to use it, and how to make them play nicely together. We covered how your income level and life stage shape the best use of each account. We walked through strategies from RRSP refund, reinvestments to smart conversions during retirement gaps that show how small moves can lead to major long-term value. We also looked at common mistakes that quietly cost Canadians thousands and how to avoid them. If you're looking to build long-term wealth in Canada and want fewer tax headaches and more flexibility down the road, these moves matter. When they're done well, they don't just save you tax, they simplify your life. If you're not sure whether your current plan is doing what it should, now's the time to revisit it. Because the sooner you get these choices working for you, the bigger the payoff later. So the big question now is, how do these strategies apply to your situation? If you're still deciding whether you should prioritize your RSP, your TFSA, or both, or if you've got a hunch that your current mix isn't working as hard as it could, don't leave it to guesswork. Let's talk. Click the link in the description to book a free discovery call, and we'll see how to make your accounts work smarter, not harder. Also, I'd love to hear from you. What's been your biggest challenge when it comes to managing your TFSA or RRSP? Drop it in the comments. I read every one, and your question might even turn into a future video. And hey, if this video helped bring a little clarity to a complicated topic, give it a like, hit subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.